Nick, how are you?
Afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Mike, this is Kirk. Good afternoon, Mark Wolmer.
Hey, Kirk, how are you? Mr. Sipe, good to see you. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well, thanks. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. DeAndre, good to see you again.
Greetings. Hello all.
How's Evansville?
It's okay.
All right, Kelly and Nathan and Charmaine, good to see you. Why don't we just go ahead and jump in if that's okay? Or Mike, do you want to wait for Omar?
No, we can get going, and I'm sure he'll join here momentarily. All right. So who do we really have on from the FFC audience? DeAndre? Everybody else kind of a vendor? I'm just trying to get the lay of the land here.
Yep, Charmaine.
I wasn't able to attend the initial launch meeting, but I've been getting the invites to the lunch and learn.
Great.
We got Professor Boylan jumping on. He represents a large contingent from Purdue Fort Wayne. So I don't know if we'll get any of their students, but professors joining on. Jake Sipe is with Housing Community Development Authority. So is works.
Okay.
Yes, we got a good book.
Perfect. We'll just kind of see where this goes. Brad, Kirk, and I, and my colleague Omar Daghestani, who's going to join here shortly, we're just all talking about what might be helpful to some of the kids that are doing this program. And we just kind of thought we'd get on and kind of share our stories about how we got into the public finance industry, a little bit about what we do, but then really open this up to you guys and use this as a learning opportunity. If you are interested in this field, how do you get in? What should your resume look like? What kind of internships would you look at? How do you navigate even trying to find the right people to be put in touch with? And really anything in the industry that you might have questions about. What do we do? So that was the thought. We don't have a presentation, any sort of script. We'll just kind of start out and kind of give background on how we got into the industry and what we do. And then we can focus on a few things, but really open it up and use this for you all. If you're looking at this industry or really any business field in general, just kind of what you should be doing. So with that, I'm Mike Schumaker. I am in Indianapolis with a firm called Stifel, which we're a full service investment banking firm located out of St. Louis, but have offices across the entire country. What we really do are sell municipal bonds to investors for, any entity that is allowed by law to issue a municipal bond. So this is a lot of like K-12 school districts that are building new schools or renovating schools. They're able to do tax-free municipal bonds. Airports, cities and towns, higher education institutions, some single family housing, a lot of different transportation, a lot of different entities are able to enter the municipal bond market. So what we do is we go out and try to get those deals in-house, kind of work them through the whole transaction. And then our job, the main job at the end of the day is to go out and find investors. If the school district needs to build a $70 million new high school, our job is to go out and find the investors. They're going to give them the 70 million at whatever interest rate the market really bears on that day. So my background, I went to school in Chicago at Northwestern, really kind of just fell into this industry. I didn't really know what I wanted to do through school. I was an economics major, so then just kind of started interviewing with some of the consulting and investment banks, consulting firms and investment banks that came on campus. Had an interview with UBS, which actually, they originally had public finance. they were in the public finance market, then they got out for a long time, and now they're back. But I interviewed on the corporate finance side of things, had a good interview, but they said I didn't really have the accounting background they were looking for. So they put me in touch with their Chicago office in public finance. Had no idea what the industry even was. Went down and interviewed, kind of fell into it. Spent about a few years there, then transitioned over to another Wall Street bank, Citigroup in Chicago. Spent about 6 years there. And at that time, we were focusing really on the big, Midwest states and cities. So really the bigger type issuers. And then in 2011, I joined a firm in Indianapolis called Securities that was a privately owned investment bank in Indiana for a long time. Spent about 6 years there, kind of switched focus to really just covering the state of Indiana. So that's where I started getting into kind of more of the school districts, higher ed, really anything and everything in Indiana, but didn't really focus much outside of Indiana. And then in 2017, we were bought by Stifel. So we've been with Stifel for about 5 years, but still really focused on kind of the same thing. So that was kind of how I got into this industry. Brad and Kirk, I'll shoot it over to you guys, kind of give an intro.
Very good. Thanks, Mike. Again, I'm Brad Bingham here, attorney with the law firm of Barnes and Thornburg. My colleague Kirk Grable is on as well. I'm not sure where he appears in this Brady Bunch setup here. So Barnes and Thornburg is a full service law firm. And again, we're sort of based in Indianapolis, but we have offices throughout the country. We've grown tremendously over the last 5, 10, 15 years, and that growth kind of continues. Within our firm, we of course do a number of different practice areas. My particular focus, and Kirk's, is in the area of municipal bond law. And as Mike kind of alluded, there's various entities that have a need and a desire to tap into the tax exempt market, from K through 12 schools, universities, a lot of smaller cities and towns. They're doing sewer utility work, water works utility work. There's TIF financings. There's any number of different niches within the municipal bond market. Similar to Mike, like I didn't sort of start out and say this is what I want to be in life. You sort of just kind of evolve and kind of fall into it in some respects. I always knew I wanted to go to law school. That was my probably since middle school, I kind of knew that was my career path. I ended up going to Dartmouth College for undergrad out in New Hampshire, then ended up back in Indiana for law school. Went to IU McKinney, did a clerkship with Barnes and Thornburg summer between my second and third year. And again, when you're clerking, you just kind of take assignments from various departments. I kind of had several from our finance department, and I just realized like that clicked with me. I kind of understood it. So I've been at Barnes and Thornburg ever since. I started in 2005, and so here, 17 years later, I've kind of grown. One of my mentors in all this has been Kirk. So Kirk, maybe if you want to say a few words about your experience.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. I appreciate that. This is Kirk Grable. I'm at Barnes and Thornburg, as Brad mentioned. I did have an idea of what I wanted to do when I went to go practice law. And I thought it would be in the field of defense contracting, dealing with defense contracts with the Pentagon. I did a summer internship at the Pentagon at the Office of General Counsel of DOD, Department of Defense. I was going to law school at IU at Bloomington. And I had a friend who was 1 year ahead of me that worked at a large law firm at that time was Squire Sanders. And I was getting a joint degree. The School of Public Environmental Affairs offered a master's of public administration. And so I got a joint degree with that master's of public administration, as well as a jurisprudence of doctorate degree, or a JD. And this friend of mine said, hey, you might want to come interview with Squire Sanders, which was a large bond counsel firm in Cleveland, Ohio. And so I did, and I turned to that. And law school, at least at that time, really didn't prepare one for this field that we're in. I mean, I feel like, what Mike Schumaker has said, that, what is this field? It's sort of similar to Brad, you sort of fall into it, but the School of Public Environmental Affairs at IU is really a great program, either at the undergraduate level or at the master's level, to prepare you for this field. It's probably the closest thing that I can think of that would prepare you for getting into this field. I have worked for the last 20 years at Barnes and Thornburg here in the Indianapolis office. There are several things that I really love about this job. And I'm going to start out, by saying, to work with colleagues like Brad, it is fun to figure out how to solve problems with colleagues like this. We run into difficult problems in the law field. Not only do you have to know the governmental law here of the state of Indiana, but you have to know federal securities laws. You have to know federal tax laws. You have to know real estate law. You have to understand a bit about the Uniform Commercial Code. So it's a field that touches so many areas of the law, and you have to have some knowledge about each one of those areas. So if you are an intellectually curious person, this is a great field to be in. So that's the legal side. And the other fun part of this job is to work with great people like Mike Schumaker, who's already spoken to us at Stifel, and then his colleague Omar Daghestani. Wonderful people to work with. And then you have people like the executive director of the bond bank who's hosting this, and Mark Woolner and his staff. And what's fun about this is that we are not litigating. So we are not going into court where we have this kind of, hatred may be too strong of a word, but, going to war with somebody. You don't have that here. You're working with different participants in the transaction to come to a closing, to reach agreement. And there is a process for doing that. And I think it's the people that you work with that is the funnest thing about this job. And you work in a kind of collegial environment with not only people in your own firm, but the other participants of the transaction. So that's my viewpoint. And if Omar's on, I'd turn it over to Mark. Omar, are you on yet?
I sure am, and my sincere
go
apologies,
ahead.
Mark and Kirk, for my delay. I'm honored to be here with friends and people I respect, and such an important thing to be talking about today. So thank you for your patience. I think, as a lot of people have said, this is a very fun field and a dynamic one where all sorts of people call. You have the chance to have this intersection between governments, markets, and the law. I was actually just talking with somebody for legislation that we actually just moved to enable some new transaction types in West Virginia. And there were some questions, so I apologize. It was actually from a governor's office of another state. So my sincere apologies about that. But I'll give you a little bit of background about myself, and then I always think it's great to see if there are questions or comments or things that we can be helpful on. So welcome that as well. But I've wanted to do public finance for probably since I was maybe a sophomore in college. I always knew I wanted to be in finance or in banking or things related to that. But I took a public finance course, which has actually very little to do with what we do. But it's still, I love that course now. This is cool. And so, I worked hard in college and was invited to a few interviews, and I did not get a job in public finance. And so I went to go do my first job actually with doing SaaS data mining for a credit card bank in Delaware, which is, I know I could see a few people laughing as people try to imagine me writing SaaS code and probably think that's laughable. It wasn't my passion. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And in fact, I turned down a sponsorship to go to Wharton on the weekends and evenings from my firm to go back to public policy school, which is what I did after working for 4 years with the goal of being in public finance. And you say, well, great. So you must have got an internship in public finance. And again, as much as I tried, I did not get hired. I ended up management consulting firm. I ended up doing strategy consulting between my first and second year graduate school. But I still knew this is what I wanted to do. And so I spent all of that summer working from bank to bank to bank. And I started in the industry at another firm that at the time was ranked #1 in this space. And I actually had the chance to work with Mike there, Mike Schumaker. Him and I sat next to each other for many years. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. I don't want to scare people away from the industry, but and
Right.
you know,
Depends on who you ask.
that's right. But in all seriousness, this is something, you know, it's a very specific thing where you get to work. If you like governments, you know, like sort of politics and government, if you like finance, and you like doing good things in the world, this can be a really amazing career path, and you get to meet so many cool people. I got to go to a bill signing with Governor Justice last week. Yeah, actually it was last week. Time moves fast. And you get to do all sorts of like really cool things like that. You know, change the law to allow you to serve your clients better. And that's the really exciting part of what we do. And you know, I really can't imagine doing anything else. I've done it now for 20 years, going this summer, and it's nice to be able to work, you know, not only with your colleagues and your clients. So I've had the chance to work with Mark and Rod and the entire bond bank team, amazing thought leaders, and you know, I always learn something when I talk with them, and I appreciate that. Similarly, working with Brad and Kirk, they are amazing professionals. Mike is cool too. But you know, that's just a nice thing when you get to find a group of people that you can work with and make an impact in the world. Wow, that's great. So I mentioned though the number of times I did not get a job. I will share how I did get a job if people are interested in that, or I don't know if we're at that point yet. So Mark, I'll turn it back to you if you want me to cover that topic, or if you want, if there's other things you want us to cover first.
Thank you, Omar. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'd love to open it up. I think this is really important. We've got obviously the folks who are on here, but I think remembering that this is recorded and this will be available for students who may have class right now studying for finals. We had, was it 25 teams, 79 innovators across 35 solutions. So our largest year of flipping finance ever, represented. I think you've got a couple of folks here, but also want to make sure that we have a chance to ask questions, I think, of you, so that this material is available for other folks later as time permits. And so maybe I'll just pause and open up to anybody who's here for a question. You've all kind of heard how Kirk, Omar, Brad, Mike got into public finance. So maybe questions about their journey, about anything else. Otherwise, I can certainly tee them up on something. DeAndre, yeah, jump in.
So my question, and either one of you can take it, but my question is simple. Would you do anything differently? If you could go back, would you redo something, go a different way, anything, what would you do differently?
I'll jump in here, DeAndre. Thanks for that question. I think, I don't know that I would do anything differently, but knowing like where I'm at now, and I agree with everything I've heard from Kirk and Omar and Mike, like, you know, really enjoy the area of law that I practice in, and for all the same reasons. But given that it's such a, you're dealing with, you know, CPAs and some accounting firms, like I wish I had a stronger background in accounting, you know, or in business. I know like with, you know, law school, IU McKinney, you know, they offered sort of a joint JD MBA program. And in hindsight, I kind of wish I maybe had a little more of that you know, skill set and that knowledge base. But again, that's hindsight. You know, you just have to learn it as you go. But that's what I would say I would have done differently. It's kind of load up more on those types of courses in the past.
Yeah, Brad, that was kind of one of mine as well. I didn't really take any accounting. Would have been nice to have, but I think if I could go back, I wouldn't do anything different with my career path or how I've kind of gotten to where I am. But I definitely would have focused more on public speaking while in college, because depending on your field, you get right out and you're kind of thrown into, you know, having to talk in front of large groups of people, or even if it's small groups of people. I mean, I remember being very nervous the first few times or 100 times I had to really talk, or and I've gotten a lot better. You just kind of get used to it. But, you know, in college, whenever I would see anything on public speaking, I'd be like, well, I don't really have a whole lot of interest in going to do that because it's not very fun. And it takes a while to get good at. So I would have spent a lot more time, whether I got into this industry or any other industry, trying to hone my skills really before I got into the business field.
DeAndre, I appreciate your question, and I certainly agree with everything Brad and Mike have said. I actually, if I think about the one thing I would have done differently, you know, you can always be better. You can always continue to learn from what you do. Having done this now for 20 years, I'm really fortunate, you know, as we sit here with Mike and Mark and Ron and Kirk and Brent, to work with really good people. But understanding, you know, who those good people are and maybe who the people that aren't looking out for you are is an important thing to understand as you go through the career path, right? You know, I think there are, you can find amazing friends and advocates, and you can find people that are not that. And just understanding what that is, I think, is very helpful as you make decisions, because you'll be presented with decisions at every stage, whether it's as early as from the interview and recruiting process all the way through, you know, your career progression. And so really finding those right sort of friends and mentors, I think, is a really powerful thing to consider. And I would agree with Mike. I think public speaking is good. I was terrible at it, and please don't tell me I still am, but I had a chance in grad school to do a lot of public speaking. I was involved in student government, and that sort of helped me build up my chops. And, you know, I think that's good. I would also add one other skill. So here, there's more than one lesson learned. One other skill that I think, you know, when you start, you think about, well, gee, I need to be really good at the quantitative analysis and, you know, good writer and all those things. Those are great skills to have. But really, if you want to progress, you need to be able to present in public, as well as, frankly, be able to distill anything you do into an elevator pitch when you least expect it. You know, whether it's at a cocktail party or industry event or what it is, being able to do that is very powerful, because a lot of times when you get to the decision makers, they're not going to say, oh, well, I have 2 hours to talk about that. Well, that's great if they do. But a lot of times, and I see Mark smiling because he knows well from his government service, a lot of times when you get to somebody in the governor's office or an influential senator or rep, you have probably 30 seconds to make your case.
That's really good insight across the board. Kirk, I don't know if you want to weigh in. I see Professor Boylan also came off mute. Dr. Boylan, do you have a question for the panel?
No, I was just going to say one thing I've learned is nobody's had too much accounting. You know, when you talk to professionals out in the field, they all say, I wish I had more accounting. And that's not so you're just in my class. But the other one is your English skills. You need to be able to do written communication very well. I've never heard people, you know, nobody wants to be in that class. My dad was an English teacher, but you can never have too good of skills there.
I would agree with that.
And I will apologize. Some of my students are in class right now. So I told them I'd come on for them.
That's okay. It's interesting how, depending on what school you go and what you major in, how, you know, sometimes the writing's different as well. Like when I first came out, I'm used to writing essays for tests, and then you get into a much different business style of writing. And I don't know if you can really get ready for that in college, and you just kind of learn it along the way. But it was much different than what I was used to writing going through college.
And this is Kirk, DeAndre. I would say that, of course, there were many things that I might have done differently, but at the time I made the decisions that I thought were best for me. But I will say this, that, some of those decisions were the wrong decisions, and I had failures in my life that, with respect to transactions or making the wrong decisions on a transaction, and I'd have to say that I've learned more from those failures than I've learned from my successes. So, I heard Omar say that he started out, with a credit card company, as I heard him right, which sounded terrible to me, but I'm sure he learned something from that. And he learned what he wanted to do. And he went out and he got after it and he got it. And so those things happen in life, and you shouldn't be discouraged by it. And, even when you didn't get the goal that you wanted, do the best that you can while you're doing what you're trying to do, regardless of what the outcome is. The walls have eyes, people will notice, and, you never know what next door is what the next door is that's going to open for you. So I would just add that.
A really cool point, Kirk. And I think that's part of what we love about flipping finance is that people, out of their own time, whether they're students, professionals, are showing up and saying yes to an event that on its face is a little bit scary, right? Like you're asked to solve a problem that you've not really seen before for community you may not have even heard of. And then you have to pitch that solution back. And it's like getting thrown in the deep end on a consulting practice when you're a student. And so I think that message would be well received from our innovators, because I think they've just lived it the last week of sometimes you say yes and you see where that door may take you. That professor's laughing, but yeah,
You couldn't agree more. And I mentioned this in a previous session that Jasper's doing one of our projects now. And we have students Google Chroming, let me show my dean, let me show. They're doing what we said. How cool is that?
It's amazing. So I heard, and certainly someone else jump in with questions, but I heard a couple of you talk about interviewing. Would love to hear what are you looking for when you're interviewing to bring somebody on new? And let's take kind of degree agnostic. So let's assume everybody's got the same, meet the qualifications, have the degree. What are you looking for nowadays as you're hiring?
Good question, Mark. I guess I'll kind of start, and maybe I might even just focus on kind of what I'm looking for, at least in a resume, to kind of even get you in the door, because we see a ton of resumes from a lot of different schools, a lot of different backgrounds. I guess when I'm looking, and this is a hard industry to get into, you may need to know someone, I remember when Omar started, he literally would just cold call people in the industry to try to get their ear and try to get their attention. Or maybe you can find an internship. It's really a niche market that it does take some work to get into, but if you can find the right person, at least if I'm looking at resumes, kind of the main things I'm looking at, probably first and foremost, is kind of what type of internships you've had. If you didn't have internships, was there a reason? Did you play a sport, which is just as good? Or did you do something with some form of leadership or involvement? If I see a resume with really no internships, nothing athletic, I'm tossing it, because it just showed me that, you didn't want it that bad really while you were in college. So, and even on the internship side, I'm not sure it really matters. That it doesn't matter to me that you did an internship in this field or another field. I just want to see that you did something, and we're looking forward to when you got out thinking about that. So that's probably my main takeaway. Grades, obviously grades need to be good. I don't think they need to be crazy good, but if the GPA is below a 3.0, I'm probably tossing it, right or wrong. But those are the kind of the things that I'm looking at. I just want to see that you were involved in something, and we're working hard through college. And so that's kind of my takeaways. Throw it to somebody else.
I'll be glad to pick it up here. agree with Mike's points. I personally am interested to see a few things. One, having interviewed people and made a few interviewing mistakes way back in the, I don't know, about 18 years ago or something, Mike. I forget. That's a joke. Not really a funny one. I'm looking for people who have, they want to be here. They've done some research. They understand what we do, what our firm and team is about. Understanding that, they're not going to understand a whole lot, but they'll understand some, have some basic idea. But if you're not excited about a job when you start, you're not going to be excited about it in 20 years or in 5 years, because you won't make it. It will just, you really have to be passionate about what you're doing, because it's going to be difficult. The hours are going to be long. There's going to be those setbacks along the way. There has been, I think, probably for everyone, myself included. For me, I'm interested to see some evidence of leadership. That could be military service, that could be extracurricular activities, that could be sports. There's a lot of ways that could be community leadership. That could be work with a church. I just want to see some evidence of, hey, I'm doing something in the world, something in the community where I know how to work with people and I know how to make a difference. I'd like to see academic achievement and acumen. That's generally, you would think of some combination of schools, programs, grades, that's going to vary based on what people have done. But again, you want to see that sort of evidence of leadership, evidence of academic achievement, and interest. And those are sort of the big three for me.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. It's a professional services industry. And so to me, you're looking at least I would be looking for, is this person coming in looking for a 9-to-5 job, or do they understand that, look, there's a lot of late nights sometimes, there's meetings that don't occur until say 7 o'clock at night, or, just your availability is your best ability. It's kind of cliche, but it's very true in our industry, which is, are you all in or you just sort of like part in? Because if you're not all the way in, to Mike's point, I'm moving on probably to the next person. And that's not to say they don't have value or worth, but it's just in this particular industry, that's sort of just the name of the game. It's kind of how we operate.
Yeah, Brad, this is Kirk, I'll just add that, I'll just echo what, Mike, Omar, and Brad have just said. I'm looking for, intellectual curiosity, the willingness to learn. The willingness to take the initiative, to have a passion about what you're asking to join. I should note that, I think that law school, they teach you the law. They do very well at it, but they don't teach you kind of client development and how you act around clients. This expectation that you sit on boards, for nonprofit entities, or you're involved in something outside of the firm to serve the community in a demonstrable way. For me, I'm an easy interviewer. I'm just trying to extract as much information as I can in that 15 minutes or 30 minutes that's allotted for the interview. And I'll often ask, hey, is there something on this resume that you want me to ask you about? Because I don't mind a long resume. I'm probably in the minority, but I'm trying to find out about you, and I'm trying to find out, is there something in there that shows that you have this determination and this willingness to learn? I mean, you come and you join us, we're going to teach you. I mean, it's just going to happen. But just echo what Brad said. I mean, it's, if you go to law school, I remember one of my law professors saying, the law is a jealous mistress. You will be asked to do things on the weekends and at night to serve clients or to serve, in this nonprofit community world. And that's an expectation that we have. And I would say that every large law firm has of everybody in it. So I would just make that point.
Yeah, Kirk, that's a great point. And I would, Omar, and I would say the same about our industry. If you're looking to get into public finance or corporate finance or, with one of the big banks, you've got to go into it willing to do anything and everything in terms of, how much you're working. We were working, 70 to 100-hour weeks for quite some time, and it wasn't always fun. Actually, it was never fun to work 100 hours a week, but you've got to go into it with the right mentality and drive, or, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, so can you guys talk a little bit about, obviously the public finance sector covers, we've got banking and law represented, but as you guys work across the state of Indiana, what other needs do you see in public finance for folks who are coming out? Maybe they don't want to go to law school, maybe kind of the corporate side isn't something for them. What other kind of areas might they explore in the public finance field?
I like to start with that one, Mark. I personally think there's great opportunities in a lot of places. I talk with people in the issuer space quite frequently, and I think to have people that think about the strategies and drive things from places like whether it's the Indiana Bond Bank or other entities throughout the state that need that leadership in terms of thinking about how do I do my budgeting, my policy, connecting public policy sort of where the rubber hits the road. I think that's an amazing opportunity. I talked with a prominent issue the other day that's looking for somebody to take on a role to help with the rollout of various P3 projects, public-private partnerships, that is, that have some actually really interesting applicability. But
what's an issuer, Omar? What's an issuer for our folks who are joining the call?
Thank you, Mark, and I appreciate that. So an issuer would be somebody on the governmental side who is responsible for issuing debt. So that could be, Mark and Ron and their team. It could be somebody with, in Terre Haute. Any sort of governmental entity probably has somebody responsible for considering public finance. How do you raise money, generally through the bond market, for your community, whether that is a village or a town or a city. Or it could be a state agency like the Indiana Bond Bank. Those would all be, the places that I would consider. I'd also think about things like municipal advisors. I think municipal advisors help craft the broader strategy and oversight of transactions and decisions. And we're fortunate in Indiana. We have some really smart people doing that and thinking about that. And it's all sort of different stages of the process that you bring these teams together with. If you think about every team, there's going to be the issuer is the one who's driving it. They're the boss, right? Mark and Ron are the boss. The rest of us are all here to help. Then they're going to bring on attorneys, folks like Kirk and Brad. Then they're going to bring on hopefully bankers, hopefully people like Mike and I, and hopefully not other bankers, but you never know. And then you're going to find, we talked about municipal advisors. You'll also look at rating analysts that are sometimes, might work for Standard & Poor's or other rating agencies to help assess the credit profile. You bring all of those people together, and you are able to build programs. You're help funding schools, helping fund pensions, helping fund infrastructure, or any variety of other things that, there are probably going to be new opportunities that, we haven't even thought about that will be there when you come. And really that's the exciting part. I tell people, we have two new folks who just started with us a couple of weeks ago. And I always encourage them, I want you to think hard about this because, certain things that I've looked at for a long time, that we may have all looked at for a long time, somebody with fresh eyes may come up with a different twist or a different idea that could be really innovative. And that's an exciting part of this business, in my opinion.
No, I agree with a lot of what Omar said. I do think one thing to say, if you're looking to get into this industry, you may want to be willing to go anywhere in the country, at least to start, or maybe outside of Indiana. I mean, Indiana's a very small market, not to say you can't get into it, but I think if you're really trying to get into this industry, you've got to be willing to go other places. But I agree. I mean, with Omar, the municipal advisor side of things, you know, we've seen in Indiana, there's not a very deep pool for CFOs for K-12 school districts. For whatever reason at this point, there used to be a very deep pool. And now as people are retiring, there's not many people coming up to fill that type of a role. So that's one place that I've seen that needs some folks to get into it. But yeah, I think if you really want to get into this industry, you probably need to look pretty broadly and say, you know, I'll get in wherever I can. And then from there, it's a lot easier once you're in the industry to kind of move around and really find what you want to do.
What questions do we have for our panel?
It seems like I have a couple different styles of students. One that wants to stay in Fort Wayne and one that wants to go somewhere exotic, Nashville, Denver. How do you get them to go to Indy? How do you get them to stay here and move up in Indiana? I think they're having a hard time seeing the progression.
Get lucky. That's a great question, because if I could go back, I might be going to Denver or one of those places too. I mean, it just seems like a pretty good place to live, but I don't know. I think you really have to find the right person. It's hard to get somebody from Chicago or a big city to come back and work for you in Indianapolis. Like, it's probably just not going to happen. So you really need to find someone that wants to stay close to home. Or you may just get them in and they see that, you know, you've got a great team to work with, you know, somewhat of a flexible, if you need to work from home, if you need to work in the office, just trying to, you know, kind of keep up with the times and make things as flexible as you can. But I mean, that's a really good question. I think there's a large group of people that are just not going to look at Indianapolis, but, you know, for the ones that do, I think there's still plenty of opportunities here, but, you know, you kind of got to have somebody that wants to live in the Midwest.
Because I noticed, like, we have a corporation here who's having trouble recruiting to Fort Wayne. And they said, if you get me one that'll get their CPA, you know, we'll have them. And so we have a lot of students who are like, hey, I'm just going to go work there. And they never take any risk, you know, because they got basically their life planned out for them. And I'm like, hey, who wants your life planned out?
Yeah.
Well, and you know, Professor Boylan, I think it's also dynamic, right? When I started my first job, the credit card company that Kirk was so blown away with, and it wasn't my first choice, Kirk, but I actually learned a lot there, was in Delaware. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, which is my home here. When I finished, I went to public policy school in Boston. And when I finished, I had the chance to, I started in New York. Now, those were all the sort of right decisions for me at that time. But ultimately, I had a desire to come home. So I think there's some possibility when people make decisions, you know, when you're starting out and you're in your 20s, chances are you probably have the latitude to take some risk and go somewhere else, try something different. It's not always as easy. But you know what? I think it helps you grow. Each one of those moves, I think I learned something from and I got better from. And it also gave me the opportunity to come home and do something that was what I wanted. You know, frankly, when I was finishing college, I actually wanted to work in Chicago, and the jobs I was getting offered just weren't particularly compelling. I'm glad I didn't just stay in those, because the best job I was offered in Chicago was as like an accounting clerk in a commercial bank suburban branch office. And I don't know that would have offered much progression for me at all. And so
I guess trying to think of ways to continue to have the students dream big. Mark and Brian will tell you, I try to make these kids dream. And the day before that Saturday flipping finance, I was in Jacksonville with 3 students presenting at a conference. So, you know, I came back from Philadelphia, Eagles, to do something special. And I want to just try to figure out, how do I get people to dream big?
So Professor Boylan, you're at Purdue at Fort Wayne, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So, I'm from Fort Wayne, and I grew up there. And so and I went to IPFW for undergrad. It's now Purdue at Fort Wayne. But
That's where I went.
Yeah, okay.
I came back to my alma mater. I'm a South Sider.
Okay, I went to Concordia. So
That's too bad.
yeah. So anyways, I think that Fort Wayne's a great place to be born and raised, and I have relatives that want to stay in Fort Wayne, and if you want them to dream big, I think it's important, kind of in a career path, is I would say take your hardest job first. Like reach for the sky, take that job, take that hardest job. And, you're going to gain some incredible skills that you could then use that if, hey, look, you still long for home. And it often happens that, people get married and they have kids and, they want to come back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas and they miss it. I mean, that's reality. And Fort Wayne's a great place to go. But you now have on your resume the kind of attraction that can bring you back to Fort Wayne that would make you attractive, maybe to not only, the municipal bond world, but, the corporate world, that they would say, geez, you have these skills. Yeah, that's transferable. So you could go into, the private sector, the corporate world. So that'd be one thing that I would say to those students that, homebodies may be too hard of a word, but look, I get it. Fort Wayne's a great place and they may not want to leave, but that's the kind of opportunity that they would get, as opposed to saying, I'm limiting my geographical area to northeastern Indiana and kind of limiting themselves to the rest of their lives. That's one take that I have, Professor Boylan.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think, Professor Boylan, you're in a great spot to help them dream big. I mean, I think back, I grew up in Columbia City, Indiana, so even smaller than where you guys were. But, I don't feel like when I went to school that many people were telling me what's even out there. Like, what are my opportunities and where do I need to go and what do I need to do? I mean, we're just going through school and learning what we're learning, but I never really, and maybe I just didn't seek it out, have specific classes, just professors that can talk to me about the real world and like, what do I want to do? And if I want to do it, how do I get there? I think a lot of kids don't even know how to get there. But, I think at the college level, that's the perfect time for these kids to really get exposed to different things that are out there. And, maybe that helps people kind of dream bigger and, go to New York, go to LA. And like Kirk said, take the harder job. But that's a great question.
DeAndre, I saw you came off mute there for a second. Did you have a question for our panel?
That was actually going to be the question I was going to ask. So
No kidding.
Really and truly, yes, that was going to be the exact same question.
And what's your perspective? I know Professor Boylan's, working with a large group of students. From your end of the spectrum of life, where do you see that in your work?
Well, in my work down here in Southern Indiana, that is a conversation that I'm a part of is, when students talk about leaving, how do you get students to stay? So I do agree with dreaming big, but once you have those students dream big and think big, is the environment that they're in, will it support that? Because if it doesn't, they will go to New York and Dallas and Boston and might not come back. So we as leaders here in Indiana have a responsibility to, if we want them to dream big, connect them with individuals who can help those dreams be a reality. I'm an entrepreneur down here in Southern Indiana, so I do have the privilege to work with students in my neighborhood and some local community groups. And so I do see that on a firsthand basis that dream big, but stay home. But then, if they have this outer space idea, they'll go to Atlanta where it's supported, especially financially.
When I was, I graduated from Purdue a few years ago, and not that many, 6, with my PhD. And when I was down in Atlanta for a year, you asked a classroom of students, how many of you are interested in starting your own business? And in a class of 30, you're going to get 25 hands raised. When I was in Philadelphia, you get 5. When you're in Indiana, you're getting 2. And it'd be neat to find a way to get the kids. You know, when I was in Atlanta, I thought, well, the economy is going to boom down here because they're getting new businesses. But it'd be neat to have students think that path for themselves.
Any thoughts on that panel? Especially, I love the infrastructure, like that infrastructure comment that DeAndre had, like kind of giving that spark to dream. You know, how do you wrap around kind of that support so they don't say, well, you kind of got me going and now there's nothing here for me to really do it. So I'm going to go off and go somewhere else and realize my vision.
Well, I mean, I'll just chime in here. I guess, again, what we've seen over the last 2 years with remote work, hybrid schedules and so forth. I mean, I would encourage folks to think about that. Can you have the best of both worlds where you're living in Nashville and maybe traveling to Fort Wayne, once a month or twice a month? I mean, look, we're on a virtual panel right now. I mean, you can connect with people so much more easily and quickly and face to face in a sense than you could even 2 years ago. And that's we've evolved in that sense. So that's one thing I'd offer up is try to figure out a way to have the best of both worlds with technology.
I want them to live in Fort Wayne and then travel to Nashville.
but Professor, you bring up really good points, which is like this starts getting into policy and maybe legislative fixes. And I think about there's like in the law school world, like if you had student loans, you can get those forgiven if you're in certain governmental type of practice areas. I mean, let's think about as a state, how could we do that? If you live here for so many years, your student loans are forgiven. I mean, there's a way to kind of anchor people to live here and have some connection here in the state.
I'm for Congress. Run on that platform. There you go. But in the couple minutes we have left, I want to make sure we open it up for any other questions of our panel. You guys have been truly fantastic. Mike, Omar, Brad, and Kirk, thank you for sharing your time, your experiences, and just the open dialogue with our innovators. I know those who are here appreciate it, and those who will be watching remotely will also find this a really valuable resource. Thank you for being part of Flipping Finance Challenge 2022. And yeah, round of applause. Thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Have a great day.
Yeah,
All right, you
thank
too.
you.
Take care.